20.
It's March 29, Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Shaparenko. Now we will be talking about the enemy strikes on the Dnipro hydraulic power plant and another energy infrastructure facilities, consequences for the industry and recovery. Joining us in our studio is Oleksandr Kharchenko, director at the Energy Industry Research Center. Good afternoon, Mr. Oleksandr. Good afternoon. This night, the enemy inflicted more strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure in western and central regions. What do we know for the time being? You know, the situation looks as follows. They have no success in the front lines and they want to compensate it with their strikes on civilian infrastructure. So we have to segregate all this thing in a number of parts. Well, the situation is really complicated now. There are restrictions on power supply in a number of regions, and power supply in the left bank of Ukraine is generally very fragile. There were a lot of strikes on aerial lines, generation facilities, and energy transportation facilities, and there is a number of tricks around this situation. First, the strikes on the aerial lines are very sensitive, but on the other hand, the preparations over there are better. So Ukrinform, who is responsible for aerial lines, they have reserve of equipment and a flow of equipment, so to say, that keeps coming. As it was found out, they have better system of protection, including physical protection, and the consumption is being recovered pretty quickly. So basically all of the consumers who were affected by the strikes on the 22nd, 23rd of March are, for them, the power supply is reestablished already, and there is the steady process of reestablishment of power supply in other regions such as Kharkiv, Odessa regions, and around the city of Kryvyi Rih, who were affected the most. This is why I'm sure that the aerial lines are more, are in a better situation for the time being. Talking about the generation facilities, that things are bad here. The strikes that were inflicted were serious. Many generation capacities were destroyed. I'm not listing the facilities themselves, that wouldn't be right, but we've lost more than 10% of the generation that was available to us on the 20th of March. And most likely it cannot be recovered quickly, so this part will not be reconstructed probably even until the next heating season. We won't be able to restore the majority of it. So the situation is really complicated, and it requires the maximum efficient activities, not only from the power technicians, because where the things can be done quickly and where there is a normal management structure. I apologize, but again, I'll give you the example of Ukrinform. The situation is pretty good there. But when there are strikes inflicted with the available reserve on provisions, Ukrinform, that was also significantly affected by those strikes. They evaluate the situation and they understand what they should do next. Unfortunately, in coal generation, the situation is completely different. I'm not seeing how and at what expense, and it's even difficult to predict the terms within which the coal generation capacities will be restored. Yet another complexity is that one of the reactors, of the nuclear reactors, is under maintenance. It was working within the last season not to the full capacity due to certain discrepancies. Those discrepancies resulted in certain developments, and currently we don't know when this gigawatt reactor back in operation is unfortunately unknown, which complicates the situation even worse. So it all may result in the following thing. Currently, we are lucky to be in the lowest peak of consumption. This season, traditionally, the consumption is pretty low, and the hydro energy facilities that can continue operating, they continue operating. There's a lot of water now, but unfortunately the situation will change in summer. We expect the summer consumption peak to fall on the second half of July, August, and even given the conditions of the maximum import, it's difficult to predict to what extent the deficit will retain in the system. And talking about the following heating season, it requires very quick reaction and preparation to the next heating season, because if we don't compensate those existing losses, at least in part, to cover the winter consumption, we will have too little generation. The generation will not be enough. This is the situation, in my opinion, for the time being. Does it mean that we should prepare to the scheduled power shutdowns in summer? Well, unfortunately, we have power shutdowns now, and I think that yes, we have to get prepared. Ukrainians have to keep this knowledge with them. I'm not joking. I've checked my generator fuel reserves. Just remember, where are your power banks, are they charged, and be ready to the restrictions in consumption to be imposed. You know, just as you've said this, the power bank prices started growing everywhere. Well, we were expecting our energy infrastructure to be attacked during winter. Winter passed in a pretty secure manner, and during the first month of spring, the enemy started inflicting strikes on the energy infrastructure. You've mentioned that as they don't have success in the front lines, they start attacking our energy infrastructure, but there are more facilities that can be of interest to the enemy. But so why energy infrastructure? So I find it difficult to find any logic behind that. But my impression is that the whole winter they were trying to attack the aerial lines. First of all, they've realized that aerial lines are pretty well protected and resilient, and they've changed their strategy. They didn't make it on time, thanks God, because if we had these attacks back in February, they would result in more problems that we have now. So I think they just were not able to make it on time to reorient and to plan those attacks that have happened, because those attacks were very well planned. They were planned with involvement of Moscow intelligence and Moscow power technicians, because there were a lot of strikes on the facilities that were being repaired. The protection was removed due to the repair works. There was a very diligent analysis of targets. The strategy of strikes has changed. They forward more rockets and drones at one single facility. That complicates the work of air defense where it's present, and that's yet another challenge that we have to cope with. So why didn't they do it earlier? Honestly, well, thanks God that they didn't make it on time, and that's enough for me. Well, talking about the compensation of generation, so what is the amount of energy that we import from our Western partners, and has the work resumed as to the additional support by the Western partners to support our power grid? Well, talking about the first question, yes, we use our capacities that connect us with the European power infrastructure, and during some hours the indicators were at maximum, and that will be the regular picture for us within the short-term period. Well, there are more urges from the Ukrainian side. The diplomatic work has intensified too, but the problem is that we're discussing the long-term things here. Generation is not something that can be quickly restored within 9 to 10 months. It's just unreal. If the generators are damaged, if the turbines are damaged, when they are being built for 3, 4, 5 years, and to recover what is damaged lightly, it takes months. And I hope that such facilities will come in bigger numbers, because the analysis is still underway where the problems are bigger, where they are smaller, because there is like only a basic evaluation going on of the consequences of today's strikes. So we still have to understand what can and cannot be done. And the donors, they are no magicians. They cannot get us the equipment just out of thin air. Even if all of the decisions will be taken with regard to the financial support, it doesn't mean that we will be able to get the equipment quickly, because it has to be manufactured, transported, installed. In fact, we have closed border with Poland, which impedes the transportation of power equipment a lot. That's really a huge problem. I know examples where some important equipment cannot be brought to Ukraine for months. So yes, we have to realize the situation is difficult. Obviously, we're looking for new ways, new routes, but something is already stuck in Poland. There is some part of equipment stuck in Poland, and it's difficult to pull it from there. So in my opinion, the situation is like this. Well, the situation is difficult in Dnipro hydraulic power plant. There are different opinions regarding the recovery terms, the condition of the equipment. So what is your opinion? Well, there were more strikes this night on other hydraulic power plants. That is very unpleasant, but let's spend some time to understand the real picture. I don't want to create any panic or invest any unnecessary optimism in you, but I hope not everything there is so badly destroyed as it may look at first sight. Well, Ukraine was preparing to the strikes on energy infrastructure for the whole year. Ukrinform was building the 2-level protection systems in generation capacities and other installations. So to what extent did it help to resist these recent strikes by the enemy, and how worse would be the consequences in case there wouldn't be this protection? Well, the first and 2 levels of protection, yes, they do their job. Second level is very efficient in protection. Really, this protection is useful and is right. The whole different thing is that it's only built in aerial networks, or like high voltage networks, and that there are some installations in Kiev where this protection proved its efficiency. Other generation capacities were not properly protected, unfortunately, and they were not prepared to those strikes. This is why the situation is more difficult there. So once again, the physical protection proved its efficiency. It demonstrated that in all cases, save for the direct strike of the missile, it does its job. There were direct strikes, but they are like single cases. So yes, we have to expand this practice and to cover more energy infrastructure facilities with this protection, and to finalize the works that are ongoing, because building the physical protection, it's not like a matter of 3 weeks. It takes 3 to 6 months. It's like a capital construction. And for what I remember, the amount of concrete only for those shelters that were planned only in Ukrinform, they amounted to 10 times more than Emirates spent as they were building Burj Khalifa, the highest building in the tallest building in the world. So that's a huge construction that takes months. It's important for us not to stop, but to continue installing the protection and to improve it. And the work is in progress all the time. Dear journalists, do we have any questions on the floor? Oleksandr Polishuk, Ukrinform. Can you please tell us what are the risks borne by the attacks on the hydraulic power plant during the spring flooding? Well, the main risk is the loss of capacity to generate electric power. So if you're asking about the threat of destruction of the dam itself, so no, I'm not seeing any such threat. And based on the comments of the engineers who work with Hydro and Ukr their opinion is that those missiles and drones that the Russians use now, they are not capable of destroying the dam itself. So there is no such threat. Another question, please.
Good morning. We already met last year many times, Mr. Kharchenko, Lorenzo Cremonesi from Corriere della Sera, and it is the same problem. But because I mentioned the fact that we already met, in the sense that the problem was very grave last year, very acute, the country almost blocked down. So can you first of all compare the situation today to the one you had to face last year, which was dramatic, the country was shut down? And also, can you give us an idea how much of your electrical system, power system is down? Last year you were able to give us even almost 90% at one point was down. Can you tell us what is the situation today? Maybe after I have another question, but let's see.
Yeah, first of all, let me compare yesterday's situation and today's situation. The main difference is that strategy which Moscow terrorists used last year was to kill our high voltage power grid. And now we have an effective defense in high voltage power grid. We have full understanding how to opposite for attack in this direction and how to, in fast route, maintenance our high voltage. We have equipment, we have specially trained technical teams, we have a lot of algorithms prepared for this case and this scenario of attack that they already understood through this winter time that old strategy is ineffective right now. They will not obtain any blackouts or something like this through attacking only a high voltage power grid. And they refocus their strategy to kill our generation capacity, especially coal-fired generation, which is dangerous not right now, but in perspective. When they step by step attack our generation capacity and move them out from the system. And maintenance for this kind of rebuilding, I could say, for this kind of capacity takes years. It's not even months, it's about years. If you want to try to restore something, you will spend 1.5 to 2 years if you really have a big damage. It means technically our main problem right now in this sphere, in generation capacity, in lack of generation capacity right now. I already said that in last like 2 weeks, yes, like 2 weeks of intensive attack to generation capacity, we lost more or less 10-12% of available generation capacity, which is very sensitive for our system.
Дякую. Чи є прошу наступне запитання?
Thank you very much. Next question, please. Good afternoon. Well, we understand that the summer is no winter, but still, can we predict, can we forecast what will be the duration of shutdowns in case those force majeure circumstances take effect? Because we know that somewhere the shutdowns lasted for 4 hours, in some places it was more than 24 hours. And what facilities can be more vulnerable to such enemies' attacks? So let's divide my answer into a number of parts again, because as we say about the shutdowns, it can be an emergency shutdown due to an attack or some technical discrepancy, so it would be and then there would be scheduled shutdowns. So if we remove the emergency shutdowns because we cannot predict the attacks, and in Kharkiv, Odessa, and Kryvyi Rih, they have some restrictions on power supply for the time being because they were in circumstances of utmost emergency. Currently, the recovery works are underway, and quite strict restrictions are in effect there. Well, people don't have electric power from 4 to 6 hours per day, and they will be living under the same schedule for a couple of weeks. But talking about the national scale, we have energy system, our power grid connected to the European partners, and we coordinate the power supply all across regions. Currently, I'm not ready to state anything because currently still evaluation is underway. So we don't know what is completely destroyed, what can be repaired quickly. So I'm not ready to give you my opinion right now, but my feeling is that probably in July, August, probably we will have to impose restrictions for the industry, when we will have to switch the industry to the night mode of operation when there is more electric power available, and probably in summer the situation can be also softened by the generation from solar power plants or something like that. Well, you're saying that the industry may switch to night mode of operation, but for what we know, the attacks are taking place in the night. Well, we're not talking about attacks, but we're saying that we have a generation gap in the night. I mean the consumption gap, when we have a lot of available electric power and we can supply it to the consumers. Well, I cannot unfortunately govern the time of the attacks. Well, another question, I was reviewing recently the records of interviews or press conference. There is such a person, Mr. Goncharuk, who visits those dams, and he was visiting the Kiev dam, and he was saying that back in Soviet times there was a leak and it was somehow repaired in a neglectful manner and it's still leaking. So for Kiev water reservoir, is there any specific threat for that? Well, watch less Russian propaganda. There is no threat. The direct answer is there is no threat related to the dams in any single Ukrinform facility all along the flow of Dnipro River. Can we expedite the imposition of segregated generation to reduce the consumption? Well, how can I answer this? It's either we can or we cannot. There are only two options here. So, talking about the substance, I don't see any focused efforts of the government on this issue. Another question, please.
Clearly, the Russians are interested to also not only to make difficult the life of the Ukrainian citizen, but to attack the industry. Military industry, economy in general, industry. Can you tell us what's happening there? You have to also to cut energy to the different industries. What is the impact? Thank you.
For sure, it's a big target for them. They try to kill our economy and they try to kill our defense enterprises through cut electricity. And we clearly see that in many cases, attack is very related to industrial regions which produce a lot, both for civil economy and for defense, that they try to do this. How big influence is right now? Not so big. It's still, I could say, minor for this moment. But if we will have more this kind of attack to generation capacity, it could be that many enterprises and many businesses will need to build own generation capacity, or they will be limited in power supply, which is absolutely decrease their production capacity.
I remember last year one of the big issues and one of a good way to fix, to try to repair the damage was to have generators. You had huge generators,
No,
municipal...
generators is not a solution in this case. Generators could work in case with small business or very small business, and they are limited in capacity and they are limited in time of work. That usually generator can work for 2-3 hours, and they need some restoration time, and then they can work again. And generation is for sure generators like a diesel generators or oil generator. It's not a solution. Solution has to be industrial scale. It could be gas-fired generation like turbines or gas pistons engines, but it needs a bigger scale solution than just generators. If you have, as example, a small business, you have a bakery, it's already a generator is not your solution. It's too expensive, it's too dirty because it's huge emission, and even your neighborhoods will be unhappy if you do everything with just generators. We need an industrial scale solution, not just small scale.
Дякую, пане Олександре. Я нагадаю, що ми говорили про ворожі атаки на енергосистему України, а медіа-центр
Thank you very much, Mr. Oleksandr. We were talking about the enemy strikes on power infrastructure, and Ukraine Media Center will be back on air at 1300. We will be talking about the spring sowing campaign and the newest challenges. Thank you.